The Millionaire's twins hadn't spoken for months until they saw the new maid do something unbelievable. Morning fog blanketed the small town of Oregon. At the very end of Maple Street, the lights in a two-story house still burned, even though it was almost noon. In the quiet kitchen, Ethan Miller sat before a cup of cold coffee, his hands covering his tired face. His eyes were hollow, the kind of exhaustion that comes from too many sleepless nights. On the couch nearby, his 6-year-old twin boys, Liam and Noah, sat in eerie stillness. One held a toy car but never rolled it. The other stared blankly at the white wall. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on the chest. Ever since Sarah, Ethan's wife, had died in a car accident, the boys hadn't said a single word. No dad, no I'm hungry, no laughter. Just silence. Ethan had taken them to every specialist he could find, neurologists, therapists, speech doctors, and each one said the same thing. Nothing was physically wrong. It's emotional trauma, they said. But how could he heal a wound when he himself was still bleeding? He remembered that afternoon clearly. Sarah screaming words that made no sense, storming out of the house, driving away through her tears. The sound of screeching tires, a crash, a phone call. And after that, the voices of Liam and Noah vanished with her. Ethan had tried hiring help, nannies, housekeepers, babysitters, but none lasted more than a few days. They all said the same thing. There's something heavy in this house. Some even left crying, whispering that it felt like someone was watching. Ethan no longer asked questions. He knew they weren't lying. The house carried too much grief. That noon, the phone rang. He glanced at the screen. The employment agency? Mr. Miller, the woman said, we have a new applicant. She has experience and can start today. Ethan thought about refusing, but one look around at the messy kitchen, the unwashed dishes, and he exhaled. Fine, send her over, but don't expect her to stay. When the call ended, he leaned back in his chair. Pale light filtered through the window, painting the boys' faces, empty, distant, lost. He murmured under his breath, "She'll probably run too." Outside, the wind moved through the trees, rustling the dry leaves. Inside, the house fell back into silence, broken only by the ticking clock, the slow heartbeat of a place that had once echoed with children's laughter. That afternoon, the Oregon sky was overcast, heavy clouds hiding the sun. Holding a paper with an address scribbled on it, Grace Parker stopped in front of the tall iron gate marked 117 Maple Street. The house looked peaceful, a white fence, a neat garden, yet something in the air felt cold. Grace gripped her purse strap and took a deep breath. She'd been out of work for nearly 2 months. Rent was due, bills piled up, and her 6-year-old daughter, Emma, needed school supplies, new shoes, and a decent meal. She couldn't go home without a job. This time, she whispered to herself, I have to keep it. She rang the doorbell. A moment later, footsteps approached. The door opened, revealing Ethan Miller, tall, with dark circles under his eyes and a weary voice. You're Grace? Yes, thank you for giving me a chance to interview. Come in. She stepped inside, wiping her shoes on the mat. The house was bright but unnaturally tidy, sterile almost. No toys, no laughter, just the thick weight of silence. Do you have experience with children? Ethan asked. Yes, sir. I've worked for 2 families, and I have a little girl about the same age as your boys. He nodded, crossing his arms. His eyes stayed cautious. I'll be honest, I've interviewed a lot of people. None lasted more than a few days. Why? Because my sons don't speak. They haven't said a single word since their mother passed away. Grace's voice softened. I'm sorry. You don't have to be. I just want you to know what you're walking into. If it's too much, leave early. I don't want false hope." Grace studied him, saw the exhaustion, the pain, the quiet desperation behind his eyes. But instead of fear, something inside her ached with empathy, an odd pull she couldn't explain. "I need this job," she said gently, "and I'm not afraid of children." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. "All right, let me introduce you to them." He led her down the hallway into the living room. Two identical boys sat on the couch, brown hair, big eyes, motionless. When the door opened, they both turned. For a second, everything stopped. Grace's heart clenched. A strange rush of emotion rose in her chest, stealing her breath. She didn't know why, but tears filled her eyes. She had never seen them before, yet something about their faces felt heartbreakingly familiar. Liam stood first, moving slowly toward her. Noah followed. They stopped right in front of her, looked up, and at the same moment reached out to touch her face. Their small hands were warm, trembling. Then, silently, both began to cry. The air in the living room was still heavy after that strange moment. Ethan stood frozen, not knowing what to do. He stared at his sons clinging to this unfamiliar woman, tears streaming down their faces. For the first time in months, he saw light in their eyes, faint but real. "Boys," he whispered, voice trembling, "what's going on?" No answer. The twins just held on tighter, afraid she might disappear. Grace didn't know how to react either. She knelt down, gently placing her hands on their backs, trying to calm them. Warmth spread through her chest, soft, overwhelming, and painful all at once. After a while, Liam let go first, then Noah. Both stood still, their eyes red from crying. Ethan crouched down to hug them, but they turned toward Grace again. That invisible thread between them now pulled tighter, unbreakable. "Thank you," Ethan murmured. "I don't know what just happened, but I've never seen them like this." Grace shook her head. "I don't know either. Maybe they just needed someone to touch." He looked at her for a long moment. The suspicion in his eyes slowly softened into something else, a small, cautious spark of trust. "If you still want the job," he said quietly, "it's yours." Grace looked at the boys, then back at him. "I do. When do I start?" "Tomorrow, if you can." "I can." Ethan nodded, briefly explaining the schedule, where things were kept, and the house routine. Grace listened, trying to focus, but her mind stayed with the image of two small boys crying in her arms. When she stepped outside, dusk had already settled. She glanced back. Liam and Noah were standing inside, watching her leave, their faces calm. Grace smiled faintly. She didn't know what waited for her tomorrow, only that everything had already begun to change. Ethan sat in the living room long after the door had closed. The soft light fell across his face, showing not just years of quiet fatigue, but something else too, fragile, indescribable. On the sofa opposite, Liam and his younger brother sat still. But their eyes were different now, no longer empty, no longer dark. In them was a light, faint as a candle flickering in the wind, yet real. Ethan looked at them and asked softly, his voice trembling with emotion, "You like her, don't you?" The boys only nodded together. "She'll be back tomorrow," he whispered, trying to sound calm. "We'll wait for her, okay?" Another nod. Then Liam smiled, his first smile after so many silent months. Just a fleeting moment, light as breath, but it made Ethan's heart tighten. He turned away, afraid they'd see his eyes glisten. When the house sank into silence, Ethan slowly climbed the stairs. Each wooden step creaked under his feet, echoing old memories. He entered his bedroom and opened the drawer by the bed. Inside was an old photo frame. Sarah smiling, cradling two newborns in her arms. He sat on the edge of the bed, his fingers trembling as they touched the glass. "Sarah," he whispered. Today the kids smiled. "For the first time since you left. Was that you coming back?" The wind stirred the curtain outside the window. Moonlight fell across the picture, and Sarah's smile seemed to glow, gentle, as if she were still there, quietly watching over the three of them. Ethan looked up, tears running freely down his face. In that moment, he knew. Something was coming. Something that would change everything, forever. The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through the curtains of Grace's small apartment. The alarm clock rang, and she quickly turned it off, afraid of waking her daughter sleeping in the bed beside her. Emma was curled up under the blanket, lips slightly parted, her face calm and peaceful. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, watching her for a long moment. For 6 years, it had been just the two of them, mother and daughter, depending on each other. Life had been hard, but Emma had never once complained. She always smiled and always asked, "Mom, will things be better tomorrow?" And Grace always answered, "They will be, sweetheart." Even on nights when she could barely believe her own words, she gently brushed her daughter's soft brown hair and whispered, "I'm going to work today, okay? The neighbor will look after you. I'll come home early." Emma rubbed her eyes and smiled sleepily. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll be good. I want us to have money for new shoes, so do your best, okay?" Grace laughed softly, a laugh tinged with quiet sadness. "All right, I'll do my best." The house at the end of Maple Street was quiet again when she arrived. Ethan opened the door, his face still tired, but his voice softer than the day before. "You're early." "I like being early. Helps me get used to things." He nodded and stepped aside to let her in. Liam and Noah were sitting on the sofa. The moment they saw her, both boys stood up, ran toward her, and each grabbed one of her hands, as if afraid she might disappear. "Good morning," she said softly. The boys didn't answer. They just looked at her with eyes that made her chest tighten. There was something in those eyes, something she couldn't quite name, familiar, yet full of pain. All day long, they never left her side. When she cleaned the living room, they sat on the floor. When she washed dishes in the kitchen, they sat under the table. When she went upstairs to tidy the bedrooms, they followed every step of the way. No words, no games, just two small shadows beside her, afraid she might fade away. Ethan watched from a distance, half surprised, half moved. He had never seen his sons attached to anyone like this. There was something in the way they looked at Grace, not fear, but the feeling of finding something long lost. That afternoon, while Grace was cleaning the boys' bedroom, she noticed how immaculate everything was. Toy cars lined up neatly, stuffed animals arranged perfectly on the shelf. It didn't look like a child's room, it looked like a showroom display. A quiet sadness crept into her heart. These boys didn't live like children. They existed, but they didn't truly live. Just then, Liam tugged at her hand. He led her to the bookshelf and pointed to the highest shelf, where an old leather-bound photo album sat. Grace took it down, blew away the dust, and opened it. Inside were photos of the boys as newborns, wrapped in blankets, lying in the arms of a woman with blonde hair and bright, sorrowful eyes. Sarah. She was beautiful, but in every picture there was something distant about her, as if her mind were somewhere else. Grace turned a few more pages. Their first birthday, their first day of school, a small family party. Sarah was always smiling, but the smile never reached her eyes. Noah gently touched one photo. Sarah in a hospital gown, holding two newborn babies, her expression neither happy nor sad, only lost. A chill ran down Grace's spine. She closed the album quickly, her heart pounding. "Do you miss your mom?" she asked softly. The boys looked at each other, then lowered their heads. No words, only the shimmer in their eyes and a silence that ached. Grace set the album down and sat beside them. She gently stroked their hair and whispered, "It's all right. Your mom surely still loves you, wherever she is." The boys looked up at her, their eyes filled with something indescribable, as if they understood that the woman in front of them wasn't just talking about their mother. She was also speaking from her own heart. That night, when Grace came home, Emma ran to her and wrapped her arms around her. "Mom, how was your first day at work?" Grace knelt down, held her daughter tightly, and took a deep breath. "Better than I expected," she whispered. "The boys are very sweet, just a little sad." Emma tilted her head, her clear eyes thoughtful. "Maybe they miss their mom, like I miss Dad." Grace froze. It had been so long since Emma mentioned the father who had left when she was still a baby. She held her daughter closer. "Yeah, maybe." That night, after putting Emma to bed, Grace lay awake. In the darkness, the image of Liam and Noah's small hands, their tearful eyes, their muffled sobs kept replaying in her mind. There was something there, deeper than pity. A feeling of connection, of familiarity she couldn't explain. Outside, the wind whispered through the window frame, carrying the rustle of leaves into the quiet room. And somewhere within that silence, Grace felt it, the sense that those two boys and she herself were bound by an invisible thread, fragile yet impossible to break. The next morning, when Grace stepped into the house at 117 Maple Street, the air was strangely still. Ethan greeted her with a short nod, his voice hoarse. "Just do as you did yesterday. I have to go out for a bit." Grace nodded. "Of course. Don't worry." As soon as Ethan left, Liam and Noah appeared at the top of the stairs. They looked at her as if they'd been waiting all along. Without a word, they came closer, each boy holding on to the hem of her shirt, unwilling to let go. "You want to stay close to me?" Grace asked softly, a gentle smile forming on her lips. Liam silently looked at her, then tugged at his brother's sleeve. Noah lifted his gaze, sadness glimmering in his eyes. Then both boys pointed toward the corner of the room, where an old wooden cabinet sat under a thin layer of dust. Grace hesitated for a moment before walking over. She pulled open the drawer. The faint creak of metal echoed through the quiet house. Inside, nestled among yellowed silk cloths, lay a small wooden box, dark brown, carefully preserved like a treasure. Grace sat down and lifted the lid. Inside were a discolored pacifier, a small hospital wristband, and beneath them 2 folded birth certificates, their edges yellowed, the ink fading as if time itself wanted to hide the truth. She picked up the first one, St. Mary's Hospital. Her brow furrowed. That was the hospital where Emma had been born. Her hand trembled as her eyes fell on the date, March 14th, the same year, the same hour. She turned to the second paper, St. Mary's Hospital again. Everything matched. Perfectly. Terrifyingly. Grace sat frozen. Her ears rang, her heart pounding wildly. "This can't be," she whispered, barely hearing her own voice. It couldn't be a coincidence. She folded the papers back carefully, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Fragments of memory flooded in, bright lights, hurried voices, a glimpse of 2 babies being carried past before someone told her she had only given birth to 1. Frantic, she searched her handbag, pulled out her worn wallet, and opened the pocket, holding her documents. There it was, Emma's birth certificate. Same date, same hour, same doctor's name. Everything matched, horrifyingly so. Grace lifted her head and looked at the 2 boys. Their skin tone, the deep brown of their eyes, the curve of their lips, even the small birthmark behind the left ear. Exactly like the man who had abandoned her. Her chest tightened, her breath caught in her throat. When Grace left the house on Maple Street that evening, her mind was chaos. She walked slowly down the long road, her thoughts repeating 2 words, It can't be. The cold wind blew against her face, but the tremor in her body came from somewhere deeper. Every step echoed her racing heartbeat. The box, the papers, the birth dates, all of it lined up too perfectly, too impossibly. By the time she reached her small apartment, Emma was sitting at the table, drawing. She looked up and smiled. "You're home. Are you tired, Mommy?" Grace forced a smile. "Just a little, honey." She sat beside her daughter and looked at the picture. 3 figures, a woman, a little girl, and 2 twin boys holding hands. Grace froze. "Who are they, sweetie?" "I saw them in my dream," Emma said innocently. "They look just like me, Mommy." The words hit Grace like a knife. She tried to smile again, but inside her mind spun. Why? How could this be? Was it possible? Someone made a mistake? That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in the dark, head in her hands. Streetlight shadows trembled across the walls. And then, faintly, memories surfaced. The bright light of the delivery room, hurried voices, confusion. She remembered seeing 2 small shapes wrapped in white cloth before someone said, "You only had 1 baby?" They told her she was hallucinating. She had believed them. The next morning, after dropping Emma off at school, Grace didn't go home. She went straight to St. Mary's Hospital, the place where she'd given birth 6 years ago. The building looked old now, paint peeling from the walls. The reception desk was quiet. A middle-aged nurse looked up. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Grace clutched her bag. "I need to see my birth records. March 14th, 2019. My name is Grace Parker. I gave birth to a girl, Emma." The nurse frowned. "Old files require a formal request." "Please, it's important." The nurse hesitated, glanced around, then whispered, "Wait here." A few minutes later, an older woman emerged, her lab coat crisp white, her gray hair neatly tied. The name tag read, "Dr. Collins." "You're Grace Parker?" "Yes." "Come with me." She led Grace into a small office that smelled of paper and disinfectant. On the desk lay a stack of aging files. "You said March 14th, 2019? "Yes." Dr. Collins flipped through the files, scanning carefully, and then stopped. "That's strange," she murmured. 2 deliveries at the same time. Same doctor, same room. Grace's throat tightened. 2? "Yes, one by Grace Parker, a baby girl. One by Sarah Miller, twin boys." The air in the room froze. "Sarah? Miller?" Grace whispered. The doctor nodded. "I remember that night. There was a power outage during delivery. Total chaos. When the lights came back, the staff had already moved the patients. It's possible." An identification error occurred. Grace's voice broke. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying there may have been a mix-up between the babies." The world seemed to tilt. "Emma," she thought, "if that's true, then Emma isn't mine by blood. And Liam and Noah." Grace sank into the chair. Dr. Collins placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Ms. Parker. We kept this quiet because we couldn't confirm." One of the mothers, Sarah Miller, came years later. She suspected something, but she never returned. Grace's lips trembled. "Where is she now?" The doctor hesitated, her voice soft. "She passed away. Car accident." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. Everything made sense. The twins' touch, their tears, the instant recognition. It all connected now. By the time she stepped out of the hospital, the sky had darkened. Wind howled through the streets, carrying away what was left of her calm. Grace stood still on the wet sidewalk, rain mingling with her tears. From that moment, she knew. Her life would never be the same. She had to know the truth, no matter what it destroyed. Grace sat in her car for a long time before she found the courage to move. The house at the end of Maple Street looked the same. Quiet, Peaceful. Too peaceful. She knew that once she stepped through that door, nothing would ever be the same again. Her hands trembled as she rang the bell. The door opened. Ethan stood there, surprise flickering across his tired face. "Grace? Did you forget something?" His voice was gentle, but cautious. Grace clutched her bag tightly, her eyes red. "I need to talk to you. It's important." He studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." The house was dimly lit. The twins were in the living room, building with blocks. When they saw Grace, they both ran to her and wrapped their small arms around her waist. That familiar warmth hit her chest like a wave. She knelt down, stroked their hair. "Hi, sweethearts." Ethan watched, his expression softening. "They've been waiting for you all morning. I thought you had the day off." Grace sat down and pulled a brown envelope from her bag, setting it on the table. "I went to St. Mary's Hospital," she began quietly. "I found my records. And Sarah's." The room froze. Ethan frowned. "Records? What are you talking about?" Grace opened the envelope and placed 2 birth certificates side by side. "Look." He bent down, reading. Same date, same year, same doctor, same hospital. His eyes widened. "You're saying—" Tears welled in hers. "Liam and Noah, they're not Sarah's biological sons. They're mine." Ethan's voice cracked as he stood. "That's insane. How could you possibly know that?" "I spoke with the doctor who was there," Grace said through trembling lips. "There was a power outage. Files got mixed. Sarah suspected it, but never took the test. She died before she could." Ethan staggered back like he'd been struck. He looked at the boys, his boys, and then at Grace. "And Emma?" Grace's voice broke. "Emma, she's your daughter." Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. The clock ticked slowly, each second stretching like an eternity. Ethan sank onto the couch. His hands shook, his eyes empty. "I lost Sarah, and now you're telling me I lost my real children too?" Grace's tears fell freely. "I never wanted this. I didn't ask for it. But from the moment I saw them, I felt something. My heart just knew." He stared at her for a long time, the pain in his face raw, human. "Do you have proof? DNA?" "Not yet," she said softly. "I wanted to tell you first. We can do the test together. I didn't want to hide it from you." Ethan covered his face with his hands. "Oh, God. Sarah knew. She said something was wrong. I thought it was grief. She tried to tell me, but I didn't listen." Grace's voice shook. "No one's to blame, Ethan. This wasn't anyone's fault. It was fate. Cruel and twisted, but fate." He looked up, voice low and broken. "If what you're saying is true, what do we do now?" Grace turned toward the twins, who were now hugging each other, unaware of the storm around them. "We get the test," she said. "And if it's true, I don't want to take them away from you. Emma will always be my daughter, and they'll always need you. I just don't want to lose anyone." Ethan stared at her, then nodded slowly, tears glistening. "You're stronger than I thought, Grace." She smiled faintly. "I'm not strong. I'm just a mother trying to do what's right." Outside, the wind howled, rain brushing against the window pane. The twins went back to building their tower, unaware their world had shifted forever. 2 days later, Grace received a call from the laboratory. The woman's voice on the other end was calm, detached, almost cold. "Ms. Parker, your test results are ready. You can come pick them up this afternoon." Grace thanked her and hung up. Her hands were trembling, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. She sat still for a long time, staring at the slip of paper with the lab's address. A wave of fear swept over her. She wanted to know the truth, yet at the same time, she didn't. Because she knew that once the envelope was opened, There would be no going back. That afternoon, Ethan met her at his house. He was wearing a black coat, his face pale and hollow from sleepless nights. "Are you ready?" he asked. Grace nodded softly. "Let's go." The laboratory was inside a small, quiet building. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant. They sat in the waiting room, each in a different corner, saying nothing. The ticking of the wall clock echoed in the silence, unbearably loud. When the staff member came out holding a white envelope, Grace's heart stopped beating for a moment. "Here are the test results for the Parker and Miller families." Grace reached out, but Ethan took it first. He sat down, staring at the envelope for a long time. His hand trembled as he took a deep breath. "Do you want me to open it?" Grace nodded faintly. "Please, open it." The soft sound of tearing paper filled the room. Ethan unfolded the document and scanned it quickly. The bold letters jumped out at him. Result 1, Liam and Noah, biological relationship, match with Grace Parker, 99.9%. Result 2, Emma Parker, biological relationship, match with Ethan Miller, 99.9%. The room fell into absolute silence. Ethan dropped the paper and buried his face in his hands. Oh, God. Grace stared at the lines, tears spilling before she could stop them. She had known it deep down, but seeing it written there, so clear, so clinical, so final, it hurt beyond words. Ethan clenched the paper tightly, his voice breaking. "So it's true. All of it." Grace spoke softly, barely above a whisper. "Now we know." He looked up, his eyes red. "But what good does knowing do? I can't look at those boys and think they're not mine. And you can't look at Emma and see a stranger." Grace stepped closer. "I never will. No matter whose blood runs in her veins, I've raised her for 6 years. That love doesn't change, just like yours for the boys." He looked at her, torn between reason and love. "What do we do now?" Grace clasped her hands tightly. "No one can decide that but us. I won't sue and I won't fight. I just want to find a way for the children to know the truth, without breaking their hearts." Ethan was silent for a long moment, then finally nodded. For days after the results, the papers lay untouched on Grace's kitchen table. She couldn't bring herself to look at them again, not because she doubted the truth, but because she feared what it might do to the children. But silence, she realized, was another kind of lie. A week later, Grace finally decided to do the one thing she'd feared the most: tell the truth. That afternoon, she picked Emma up from school, but instead of turning toward home, she drove straight to Maple Street. "Where are we going, Mom?" Emma asked, curiosity in her voice. Grace held her daughter's hand. "We're visiting my friends, Liam and Noah, but today, Mr. Ethan and I also need to talk to you. It's something important." Emma nodded. "Okay, Mom." She had no idea that inside Grace's bag were the hospital letter and 2 DNA reports, small pieces of paper that had changed everything. When they arrived, Ethan was already waiting on the porch. His face was calm, though shadowed with gravity. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. Grace nodded. "We can't hide it forever. They deserve to know." All 5 of them sat around the small dining table in the living room. Outside, the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting soft golden lines across the wall. Grace held Emma's hand while Ethan rested his on the shoulders of his sons. "Kids," Grace began, her voice trembling. "Today, your mom and Mr. Ethan have something to tell you. Something not easy to say." The 3 children looked at the adults, silent, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Ethan took a deep breath. "Years ago, when you were all newborns, there was a mistake at the hospital. The nurses mixed up the baby's identification bands." Emma tilted her head. "What does that mean?" Grace gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "It means..." I brought you home, but you weren't the baby I actually gave birth to. And Liam and Noah? They're the babies I did give birth to, but didn't get to take home." The room fell completely silent. The children stared, first at each other, then at the adults. Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "So, you're not my real mom?" Grace nodded slightly, her voice breaking. "No, sweetheart, not by blood. But I'm the one who's raised you since the day you were born. I've heard your first laugh, your first cry, your first word, and I love you more than anything in this world." Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, "Then, who's my real dad?" Ethan knelt down, eyes glistening. "It's me, Emma. I'm your dad." The little girl stared at him, then suddenly threw her arms around his neck. "I knew it," she murmured, her voice trembling. "I saw you in my dreams. You were there, and so was Mommy Sarah." Ethan held her tight, tears streaming freely down his face. Grace watched them, her heart aching, a blend of pain and relief. Liam and Noah quietly stepped closer to Grace. Liam whispered, "And us? We're your children?" Grace nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Yes, my blood runs in your veins, but that's not what matters most. What matters is who's been there for you all this time." The boys wrapped their arms around her, and the three of them cried together. Ethan stood watching, his eyes wet, but a faint smile breaking through. Months passed after the truth came out. Life was no longer chaotic. It slowly found a new rhythm, a new normal, where no one had to hide anything anymore. Grace and Ethan never signed papers, never went to court. They made one simple decision together, to share love and responsibility, as one family. The twin boys alternated weeks, one with Ethan, one with Grace. Emma stayed with her mother, but every weekend she couldn't wait to visit Ethan's house, where her twin brothers were always waiting at the gate, holding a ball and a box of cookies. Breakfasts were no longer silent. Grace made coffee in the kitchen, Ethan fried eggs, and the children chattered and laughed around the table. Laughter mingled with the clinking of spoons and cups, filling the house that had once been so painfully quiet. One morning, Grace sat Emma down at the table. She knew it was time to revisit the story, gently this time, so her daughter could truly understand. "Emma," she began, "do you remember what I told you about you being Mr. Ethan and Mommy Sarah's daughter?" Emma nodded. "I remember." "Does that make you sad?" Grace asked softly. The little girl looked at her mother with wide brown eyes. "I cried a little. But then I thought about it. No matter what, I still want to call you Mom, because you're the one who's loved me from the very start." Grace froze. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but this time it was a tear of happiness. She pulled Emma into her arms and whispered, "And I'll always be your mom, Emma." That afternoon, the whole family went to the small park at the end of the street. Ethan brought a basket of pastries, Grace carried a thermos of tea, and the three children ran across the grass, laughing. Emma giggled as Liam chased the ball, and Noah pretended to fall dramatically to the ground. Their laughter echoed through the golden air of sunset. Ethan watched them and said quietly, "See that? This house. It finally has real laughter again." Grace nodded, her gaze tender. Because now it finally has a real family. They sat together on the old stone bench, watching the children play. Neither said another word. They simply let the peace fill the space where pain used to live.